Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Financier. Today, we're going to talk about Jamie Dimon's shareholder letter. It is one of my favorite things to read every year. This, along with Warren Buffett's shareholder letter, his annual letter that he's been writing for over 70 years, I think. Yeah, 60, 70 years. It's an amazing, first off, I'll start off with Warren Buffett. I've read all of his shareholder letters since I think it's 1956. That in itself is a great just tool. It's your mini MBA in investing. He talks about the simplicities of making good deals, finding good businesses, why he makes the investments, the return on equity. It's very exciting. It's very simple. It's so clean to read. It's about 10 to 20 pages each letter. And if you don't read anything else this year, just read his shareholder letters. You'll be a better investor for the rest of your life. So Warren Buffett talks about two people that he also recommends reading. I'm sure he reads hundreds of letters every year, but there are two investors that he mentions. He's mentioned quite a few times. Both of them have said it's very honorable. First up is Howard Marks from Oak Street Capital. He's a very reputable investor. He talks about market cycles. He's very similar to Ray Dalio, but he's more known in the world of debt and credit. And he runs a really big mega hedge fund. It's in the $20-30 billion plus range. It's an amazing hedge fund. Howard Marks writes the Most Important Thing letter. It's very well written. He's written a book. He's written a couple other things, but the Most Important Thing is a very well known investor letter on the street. Howard Marks is also a very clear thinker. He thinks very macro, so I recommend checking that out. The second letter is by Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO and chairman of JP Morgan Chase. I'm a former employee and alum. Jamie Dimon is he's a thoroughbred banker. He's the best I've ever seen. I've seen so many of them. It's been an honor to have a chance to work with him, have a chance to work at the company. You could see that finance banking is very much ingrained in his mind. It's been in his blood and his family's blood for I think one or two generations. His dad was a wealth manager, so he's a New York boy, just like Lloyd Blankfein, who was a former CEO of Goldman Sachs. Jamie Dimon is amazing. He's been the current. So just to give you a quick background before we jump into his shareholder letter, he was the right-hand man to Sandy Weill, who built up what is now Citigroup. He actually got fired from Citigroup, so Jamie Dimon decided to go into his own, start his own career in banking. He became the CEO of Bank One in, I think, the year 2000. Pretty big position for anybody who becomes a big CEO of a large bank. But he had to move to Chicago, so it was outside of New York. Transition. I think he ended up he got acquired by Chase. That eventually emerged with JP Morgan and became JP Morgan Chase. So that was his rise. He's been the CEO of JP Morgan for, I think, since 2005. So we're just about 16 years. He's a very long-standing CEO. This is twice the regular tenure of any CEO. He's done an amazing job. There's no question that JP Morgan Chase is the number one universal bank in the world. They provide a variety of services that are much bigger than like a Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley and better run than a Citigroup. And they do everything that you can imagine, from commercial banking to investment management to private equity to every single thing you can imagine in a bank, from custodial assets. They do it really well. They're well run. He's not a guy who likes to spend money. He's very much, bottom line oriented. So they have a fortress balance sheet. He talks about all of this in his shareholder letter. He's been doing it for so many years. I enjoyed it when I was an employee at the firm. I still read it every year because Jamie Dimon provides a macro mindset from the world of banking, which is unique, because banking has a very it obviously touches every single industry, and JP Morgan is a very big bank. It's been around for 100 plus years. John Pierpont Morgan, when he founded the company, I think in 1890 or in the mid 1800s, they built their business really on the steel industry, the railroad industry. Did a lot with the Vanderbilts and Carnegies, but it's still been running. The House of Morgan is still operating. And today, Jamie does a really good job of understanding the depths of different problems in America. He doesn't talk about just the wealthy and the 1%. He talks about the problems that are happening in commercial communities. You know the Chase banks. You've seen them all across the country. They have a fantastic reputation. Their online banking is awesome. Mobile banking is awesome. But he talks about the problems with consumers, small businesses, everything that's going on in local communities, because Jamie's been known to travel to these small communities, meet with the people that are of the local areas. He talks about inequality and how he's addressed it in his company. This is a 66-page letter, so it's very well in depth, very detailed. He talks about so many things, and I'll get to a couple of them very soon. And what's pretty exciting is that he's been able to be very consistent. So the biggest thing is that they're one of the largest SBA lenders in the country. So they naturally were providing the most largest number of loans to the most companies. So they have the best oversight of what really happened, what really worked. So without further ado, let's talk about why Jamie Dimon sees an economic boom coming in the next 2 to 3 years. He thinks this current economy is going to run at this momentum till 2023. It's going to be very exciting to see that. His recipe for the success is excess savings, the stimulus savings, all the money that's been given to people. They haven't been able to spend it in the same fashion they'd like to. Successful vaccines that have been deployed in the last 12 months, record time frame, deficit spending, which is one, fueling the stimulus savings, and two, we're going to have this infrastructure plan that will be about $2 to $3 trillion. And then at the end of the pandemic, which is really very close at the current moment in time, we'll see all this stuff come together. It will last for another year or two. It'll be very exciting for people to come out into the economy. If you got questions, let me know. I'm chimed in, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything is streaming right now. Let me know your thoughts, what you think is going to boom for the economy, why it's important, how it's going to impact people and businesses in the world. So here's a picture of Jamie Dimon. He's on the cover of a shareholder letter. They love to honor him. He thinks the economy will boom for the reasons mentioned. I don't doubt any of them. I think it's a recipe for success. A lot of people are hoping or expecting a retraction or a drawdown. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, given how much money is available in the country right now, how low the interest rates are, and how considerate right now both the federal and the government programs are about the lower class, about helping them get their feet back into the workplace, getting the economy up and running once again. So Jamie has been very open. He's been traveling the world. He does business all over the world with every single entity, from institutions to sovereign wealths and everything. He has spoken to more Chinese leaders than probably most companies have, because they had to finance a lot of the projects. They had to do a lot of the business over there, international, national, whatever it may be, with vendors and stuff. And he has noted that the Chinese leaders already believe that the American country, the United States, is in a decline, that we've lost our edge in technology, infrastructure, and education. These are not a surprise. This is the primary reason why we have a $2 trillion infrastructure bill coming out. Our technology is number 2 to China. While still it might be amazing, it's not high enough. And our education is definitely at the bottom of the list. I don't even think we meet the top 10 in some areas. So we're definitely torn apart from the outside. That's not a good sign. People like to think that the grass is greener, but that's not the current case. So China probably in some cases doesn't even view us as a threat. So there are some areas that we need to work on there just to bring the country back to a leadership position so capitalism wins. My biggest example that I love to use is that we have an infrastructure plan. We're not focusing on transportation enough. So it's important to say, hey, where could we be leaders? I think transit and transportation, the railway systems is a really good example. JP Morgan is the best example because they invested and built their business on railways. Or financed them in the early 1900s, late 1800s. China's railway system, the high-speed rail, is 3 times faster than our current consumer rail, and probably faster than our freight rails as well. And it just doesn't make sense. There's no reason for us not to have this type of infrastructure today. He also mentioned that at the current point, actually, it's worth noting, if you've never been in New York, that JP Morgan had 3 large buildings, office buildings in the Park Ave, Grand Central area. They were already doing the largest tear down of a commercial building in New York City of their headquarters. They were going to rebuild it. They moved a lot of their employees. I think they had 30,000 employees on that 48th and Park area, 50th and Park area. And they had dispersed them. They had reduced this footprint down to like 10 to 15,000 employees. And now he's predicting with the remote work, 40% of those employees can actually work from home or from anywhere else in the world. So he can reduce his footprint even further than it was before, which is pretty impressive given the size of the company. It's a couple 100,000 employees. You can't do it at the commercial banks, but you can do it at the back office, some of the front office roles, the middle office, technology roles, some of the management roles. So 40% is a pretty big discount. I think it's something that other companies need to take note of, because if JP Morgan can do this with so many employees, there's no excuse you can't do it with 50% if you have, a tenth, you have 100 employees or 1,000 employees. Next up, he mentioned in his shareholder letter something he's been very adamant about for the past 6-7 years since I've been really actively reading this, is they have always invested, a lot in technology. There's a threat in the world from fintech, neobanks, other banks, and other lending institutions that are not traditional banks. So he's always invested a lot in technology. He's made sure that cybersecurity is on top of the list. I think he spends more than most of the Fortune 500 companies, probably more than most of the Fortune 50 companies. It's for a good reason, because he has so much consumer information, so much critical information, and he's a big spender and big proponent of cybersecurity. So that's very impressive. If you have thoughts on cybersecurity, on the world of technology, I'd love to hear about it, what you've seen or what your company's investing in or what people should be investing in. I think it's something to keep an eye on. So it's a pretty big point that he noted. He's always noted. I think it's worth mentioning that if your company or the company you're investing in is not noting this, it's a concern. It's a yellow flag, maybe a red flag, because if data is loose or it's hackable, then you're under threat. So it's something you need to just be aware of. That are we investing or are we not investing, right, in cybersecurity? So again, he believes this boom is going to happen until 2023. If you have a chance, this is a link to the shareholder letter. I'll send it over to you if you'd like to check it out. It's interesting. I read it, 66 pages. It used to be much shorter, but he's put a lot of thought into it. He's really thought about where the economy is going, what the country is doing, how banking can be improved with the regulatory and compliance issues being reduced, so that banks can provide more lending. It was one of the biggest obstacles in 2020. They had a capital requirement. They had to keep X amount of dollars on their balance sheet, which is great. They didn't have a capital liquidity problem. But on the other hand, there were a lot of businesses and consumers that couldn't get access to capital because the banks have to meet capital requirements, and they can't simply just lend like they used to in a relaxed environment. So there's always a catch-22 in these scenarios. So Jamie Dimon does a fantastic job. I recommend checking it out. It's an awesome letter. He breaks down so many more details. Obviously can't fit everything in 15 minutes, but it's something I wanted to highlight because it's something I read all the time. If you got questions or comments, feel free to keep bringing them in. I love to hear what your thoughts are, what letters you're reading, what's on your mind on the markets, on banking, finance, anything in this area. I love to see what else is going on in the world from cybersecurity and technology as well. So without further ado, I'm gonna close down today's episode. Let you guys tag me if you have any questions. Reach out on Twitter and Quora if you have any more questions, and I'll reach out. But until next time, I'll see everybody, and we'll talk about what's going on tomorrow. Take care.